over a much larger range. You may be able to get into rooms that you couldn't get into before simply because you upgraded the your router to 802.11n. So it's been fantastic, and it does have perfect backwards compatibility. Moving on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, in the consumer world, it's been fabulous. Enterprise has been a little slow, partly because people were waiting for the standard to be ratified. Now we're beyond that. Of course, there is that small issue of the economy as well. The technology is built into a variety of devices. I think, a year or two ago, people would say, well, you're going to pay a premium for 802.11n, and so you can wait to deploy or only do it for this, that segment. Now, at the chip level, everything is going to 802.11n, and there's actually a lot of innovation on the low end coming up with single stream, not maximum data rate, but lowest power, lowest cost clients targeted at the handset market, smartphones and so forth. So we're really just at the beginning of the innovation that you're going to see in terms of products based on this. As I mentioned, this is the biggest thing to happen in the wireless LAN world since the initial standard was formed. So, okay, let's move on. So it's generally 802.11n is wonderful, but there are some challenges. In order to take full advantage and go the full speed, you need to turn on all these fancy speed features. It's somewhat complex. You're going to need to do the channel bonding, which is combining two channels together. If you do that in the 2.4 band, you only have one 40 megahertz channel, so that microcellular architecture won't really work in the 2.4 band. It does in the 5 gigahertz band. The MIMO makes the radios work very differently. Just stated simply, if you did a site survey with 11G products and then you put up an 11N infrastructure, doing a site survey for that, you'll get very different results. What used to be dead spots may work great now, and maybe other areas that where the signal was very strong might not be as good with 802.11n. It's because the way the system propagates, the way that it gets range is very different than before. It's actually leveraging reflections, bouncing off of walls and windows and so forth. Whereas in the older systems, those reflections actually damage the signal. So it's very, very different. It requires a new set of tools, by the way, for surveys. So, if you're using a third-party tool, you want to ask them how are they doing it differently for 802.11n. A simple RSSI measurement, measuring the power level that's perceived, won't be enough to give you a good picture anymore. It was fine for G clients, but not for N. Because we're cranking up the data rate so much, you might need to make some changes to the wired network. Essentially, we're probably moving the bottleneck from the wireless network out to the wired network. Each of the APs, as I mentioned, might be giving you, say, over 300 megabits of real throughput now. So if you have a 10 AP system, all of a sudden you're way beyond the 1 gigabit architecture that's common for most enterprises on the Ethernet side, and you may have to do something different, partition it or something. One of the things that comes along with 802.11n is diversity of clients. Not only are you going to have the legacy 802.11b and G clients that will operate on the same network, but you'll also have a variety of N clients. As I mentioned, there's a lot of activity on the low end right now targeted at handsets. But a mobile handset that has a low power client that with a single antenna, single stream, its perception of the network is going to be very different than a notebook that has a 3x3 antenna, a very large antenna, probably printed on the entire back of the screen of the notebook, and it's going to be operating at higher power. So its perception of the network will be very different. And when you're designing a network, that's a new thing that you really have to look at, which is what applications am I going to support? What types of clients are going to be needed for that application? And which way am I going to optimize it? Am I going to optimize it for the handsets? Am I going to optimize it for the more capable notebook-type clients? All right, let's go. I think we can skip over the wired network challenges one and just move on. Good. For 802.11n, I mentioned the fact that if you want to go full speed, then you need to do channel bonding and put two channels together. In the 2.4 gigahertz band, there will only be one 40 megahertz channel. And so, in fact, the channel blanket is probably the only way you can deploy, where you put all the APs on the same channel. So if you look at that diagram there, it's showing two 4-channel blankets, one operating at 40 megahertz with 11N and another one at 20 megahertz with G, and then two 5 gigahertz blankets as well, and the same kind of thing. A brand new 11N operating at 40 megahertz and then a legacy 802.11a. You could organize it that way. There's a variety of other ways that you can organize it. We feel that we give you the opportunity to run 2.4 to run 802.11 in the 2.4 band. That's significant. That'll give you better propagation, and a lot of the devices support 2.4, but the typical vendors might be promoting, well, just put only legacy stuff at 2.4 and move everything else to 5 gig because of the fact of those channel constraints that I talked about. But we give you the option to do that. It's also, the channel blankets can really be a convenient way to help you migrate from the legacy world to a brand new 802.11n. And you can organize your blankets any way you want, but maybe initially you only have one 802.11n blanket, and then the other 3 are supporting legacy devices. And as you transition over time and more of your devices are full-speed 11n, you could switch over and dedicate more of your radios to the 11n infrastructure. And it's up to you how you do that. By the way, why do you want to separate N and G? Well, first of all, because of the channel issue. The G clients are going to operate on a 20 megahertz channel, so you would immediately be cutting the speed in half if you want to support N and G on the same channel. But then beyond that, when they operate together, the 11N stuff has to operate in legacy mode, and it's actually much, much slower. So you're not getting the full benefit out of the N. By separating them into completely different physical blankets, you allow the 11N stuff to run at full speed, and you allow the legacy clients to operate at their full speed, but without interfering at all with the 11N stuff. So it can be very good and very so this channel blanket architecture is very complementary with 11N. Well, let's move on and talk about some examples of Extricom and Extricom success stories, and I think most of the ones that you're going to hear about also are using 11N. Take it away, Dan.
All right, thanks very much, Phil. That was a really good dive into some of the issues that wireless LAN presents. And so for our first success story or case study, I wanted to bring up a school named Essa Academy. They're actually not here in the United States. They're located in the UK. It's the equivalent of a combined junior and senior high school that also functions as what they call a center of educational excellence in northeastern England. The Essa, the reason we cited it as a case study is the director of IT there has a very sophisticated understanding of where he wants his educational environment to go, and they are dedicated to an initiative called Learning Anywhere, where essentially any student in the school anywhere on campus will have access to a wireless backbone. And we're talking about a fairly significant user population. It's 900 students and 120 staff. We're also talking about a pretty big mix of applications, including an individual iPod Touch, which is issued to each student